Terry, I apologize. I missed your question. You have to put it in there again. I'm going back.
Oh,
uh,
he's asked if we're confident, or he says he's
oh, here it
confident
is.
that Indiana will score 40 at OSU. Are you guys confident OSU will score 41 or more? Um,
I think Indiana's going to score a lot of points on Ohio State. Oregon just scored a lot of points on them, and I think that defense is in question for Ohio State.
yeah.
So I don't know if I'm going to say 40 because I think that Ohio State has a better running game that they can control the clock a little bit better. But I definitely think that they're probably going to be, if not the most points scored on Ohio State, second most this season in the
Yeah.
regular season.
It'll be a game in the 30s for at least, for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Larry, you have any thoughts on that?
I agree with both of you guys. I mean, I don't think it's going to go all the way up to 40 for a couple of reasons, but I could see it being a high scoring game. Indiana, we'll talk about them in a second, I guess. So,
Yeah. Well, let's talk about them now. How about that? Hit subscribe, everybody. And yes, John Jacobs, Terry playing hardball. You got to do it. You got to do it. So. um, all right. So let's talk about Indiana now. Indiana comes out, absolutely blows out Nebraska 56-7. Curtis Rourke, he goes out at the beginning of the second half in this one. There were some thoughts that he maybe could have continued playing, but at that point they were up by so much it almost felt like they didn't really need him to keep playing and felt like they were very confident in Tayven Jackson. And honestly, I don't see any reason why you wouldn't be confident in Tayven Jackson. Tayven Jackson goes 7 for 8 in the second half, and he has 91 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, and a 99.9 QBR. Zach, we talked about the -1 QBR Mike Wright had earlier this season. Well, Taven Jackson comes in with a 99.9. That's pretty impressive, especially for a backup.
That's good, right?
Yeah, very good.
Okay,
it's darn
just
good.
want to make sure. Just want to make sure.
So, I mean, this was obviously just a complete blowout, routing, whatever you want to call it, by IU over Nebraska in this one, Larry. My question for you, Larry, is this more IU being good or is this more Nebraska being bad?
I think it's a combination of both, and that's an excellent question to kind of talk about both teams here. Look, what Cignetti has done with Indiana is nothing short of quite impressive, and I think that's an understatement. He brings in a lot of transfers. He brings in guys that he knew, but he brings in guys from other programs. But you just look at the way that things are running there. The offense, the output is astounding. You know, you look at the rushing attack. You got Ellison, 9 carries, 105 yards. Lawton, 8, 64 yards. I mean, all over the field, things look wide open when they're playing. They're dominating. You think, okay, first couple games, let's see when they get into conference. Let's see when they have more formidable adversaries. Now, they're going to have more formidable adversaries still. So a lot to be sorted out. But it's still, this is Indiana we're talking about. This is a team who many seasons in and out, the Hoosiers do not look like the upper echelon, is an understatement in football anyway, of the conference. And they are coming out and just, they completely dominated Nebraska as if it was, you know, an FCS team, just making it look easy. The backup comes in, he's efficient, just one incompletion. I think with Nebraska, what you're seeing is they are very much still in the earlier stages of a rebuild. There's still a lot of promise with Raiola. There's still a lot to be like there. But some of what the hype was earlier in the season, you know, with a true freshman who has a ton of talent, but he's the one stirring the drink. He can't do it. He's still going to be prone to freshman mistakes. You started to see it even with Rutgers, and that was at home. Struggled to score, only 2 touchdowns the offense mustered in that game. He made some mistakes, made a ton of mistakes against Indiana. 3 interceptions, no touchdown throws, and they're throwing the ball 44 times. So when you're relying primarily on that true freshman quarterback, I don't care how much hype, I don't care how talented, I don't care how physically gifted he is. That's a problem with coaching and philosophy, though, to an extent. And I think Nebraska is showing that despite some of the promise they came in with, they are very much trying to just claw their way. And then, look, they're 5-2. So they've got one more game to get bowl eligible. I think that's the goal, is to see progress, to continue to build. And we know what that coach can do. We've seen him do it at Baylor. We've seen him do it at Temple. We know what he can do. So you want to keep building, but there's a serious problem when you bring in a true freshman. You don't have the support network from a philosophical standpoint or run support around him. to really help him to succeed early on. Some of the bumps in the road are expected, but you can't just put everything on his shoulders and expect him to run with it and have a great season. Season's not bad, 5-2, but it's a combination of Indiana being very impressive, no sign of slowing down, really impressive job by Cignetti. And then on the other side of the ball, you got to have more of a plan than just relying on a true freshman to do everything for you. He threw the ball a bunch of times, made a bunch of mistakes. Indiana dominates, and that's the story of the game.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think like for me, it didn't help Dylan Raiola that one of the times when they had their best drive of the game, I think it was their second drive, they get down into Indiana's side of the football. I think they're almost in the red zone. I don't think they're quite there yet, and it's 4th and 1, and they fumble, and they don't get the 4th down conversion there. Which for me, that was like the turning point of the game. Like that was at the end of the first quarter, still only 7-0. Indiana had been stopped at least once. They did have the long touchdown drive, but they got stopped and got a turnover on downs there, and then you get back to Nebraska. And so I felt like at some point there, like Nebraska still had hope and still felt like, okay, we can do this. But the fact of the matter is, going against a team as good as IU, you're not going to win on the back of a freshman quarterback. I don't care how talented you are. And I think Dylan Raiola is very talented. I just think he's a freshman quarterback. I think he's going to be much better as the years go. But in this one, like you can't have your running back fumbling the ball and not converting on 4th and 1. If you want to win these type of games, you have to do that. And I just felt like there on out in the second quarter, Indiana was just efficient, looked like nothing could stop them, and to me it looked like Nebraska started to give up, which I think is an indictment on that team, which is unfortunate because I would like to believe that Matt Rule teams are better coached than that and have more motivation than that. But I think even Nebraska fans would agree. You watch that team into the second quarter, into the third quarter, like they did not look nearly as motivated as they did at the beginning of the game.
They had some sloppy play this season too, like in other areas too, some block kicks, some things that they got to get fixed. So despite the fanfare and what many perceive as an ascension with Matt Rule, which is still very much in play, obviously a very talented young quarterback, there's some issues there that they hope will get cleaned up and don't become wider, narratives surrounding the program going forward. It'll be interesting to watch.
Yeah. Last question here, Larry, and then Zach. This is a little bit predictive, so you can answer this as well. We'll obviously talk more about it when we get into the preview, Zach. But Tayven Jackson, he's going to take over next week. Now, it is at home against Washington. They're not traveling to Washington, which is a benefit for them. But Taven Jackson taking over. Curtis Rourke has been so good this season. I think that the running game does not get enough credit for what it's been able to do. And I'm not trying to take away credit from Curtis Rourke. Curtis Rourke been fantastic. I'm just saying I think the running game helps that a lot as well. But Larry, do you have a lot of concerns with them not having Curtis Rourke for this next game? Washington, not an elite team, but they've done some good things this season. I still think this is a good football team in Washington. What's your thoughts, Larry?
Where are they playing that game?
At
You
Indiana.
probably just said it, but where?
Yeah, at Indiana.
At Indiana.
I have less worry because it's at Indiana. I think Washington is a very talented team and has a lot of ability, but they are not the toughest adversary this red hot Indiana team is going to face down the stretch. I think you got to rely on other players. You got to rely on your running game. You got to get the ball in the hands of your playmakers quickly. I'm not terribly worried about Indiana this week. I think anytime you're having great success with a starting quarterback and you've got to put your backup in, you'd be silly not to have some concern. But based on the way this coaching staff has gone about it so far, based on the amount of transfers that are upperclassmen that this team is stacked with, I think they're going to be able to weather that storm and they're going to have a solid game plan to tackle it. And one of the things I worry about with Washington is the coaching and how good it is and whether or not they have their stuff together on a week in and week out basis. So this isn't the game that I worry about Indiana with, even with the backup quarterback. Now, I'd be a fool to be as confident as I would have been if they're going in with their starter. But I think they pull it out. And I think for Indiana fans, it'd be a darn shame if because of a quarterback, switch that they stumble against a Washington team that I think they're primed to beat, especially at home. We'll see what happens. I don't think it'll be as easy as it had been, but I still expect them to be okay.
Yeah.
Zach, really fast. I see people talking about, yes, Taven Jackson is Trace Jackson Davis's younger brother. He is his half brother.
I did not know that.
Yeah, same mom. I believe Dell Davis. I think I'm getting correct dad. That's Trace Jackson Davis's dad. I think somebody else's Taven's dad. It really doesn't matter all that
That's
much.
awesome,
Half
though.
brothers.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, Trace Jackson Davis, who is a legend.
Awesome player, dude. Awesome.
in
And I
basketball.
love to hate, and we beat him a good amount of time, but awesome player, man. So
Yeah.
that's cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah. But yeah, it's so even though he doesn't have the Davis, that's why half brother situation there. But Dale Davis. I apologize. Thank you, John. Go ahead, Zach.
I was just gonna say, I think the one thing that would concern me, like Nebraska doesn't have the playmakers that Washington does on offense, and so Nebraska didn't run the ball well at all. I mean, I think it was 29 carries for 70 yards. Jonah Jackson Jonah Coleman. There we go. Jonah Jackson was a guard for Ohio State. Good job, Zach. Jonah Coleman.
He's not running the ball in this game.
No, he's not. Jonah Coleman, on the other hand, I think he's going to be a different back than they faced. Giles Jackson and Denzel Boston is going to be the best pair of receivers that they faced. Will Rogers is going to be the best quarterback they faced. So I do have some concern. The other concern I have is Washington's coming off a bye week. So they've had time to rest up, maybe install a different game plan. So I'm probably less concerned about Tayven Jackson, though, than I am about just what, Indiana has done a good job of being a disruptive defense. They did struggle a little bit with Maryland, just with the pass game at times. I thought defensively they were mostly pretty good. So when I say struggle, I mean struggle relative to how they've looked the rest of the season. So Indiana fans, don't jump on me for saying that. But this will be the hardest test for them from a defensive standpoint, just with all their playmakers.
Yeah, no, I agree. We'll see how it goes. I'm very confident in Taven Jackson, though. I know people can bring up the stats last year, like 2 touchdown passes, 5 interceptions, but guys, Tom Allen was his coach. I mean, that's what happens when you're on offense and Tom Allen's your coach. Anyway, good defensive coordinator for Penn State. We said it multiple times. He's going to be a good defensive coordinator, but not a good head coach. It just is what it is.